official timepiece there in the back of the room says it's 7 o'clock, so I'm going to go ahead and just get this started. Welcome to our air-conditioned conference room. Unfortunately, a couple weeks ago, the air conditioning went out in part of the museum, and it wasn't all that important. It's back on, thankfully. I'm so happy to see everybody here this evening to see this presentation. I think that, of course, we live in this triangle of these three battles. We've got Monocacy, Antietam, and Gettysburg, and I think that sometimes Monocacy gets overlooked because those are larger engagements. But certainly Monocacy and its aftermath were very critical to the war effort, and it's kind of an indication that despite it being a smaller battle, it had tremendous strategic importance. And I think tonight we're going to learn some interesting things about the aftermath of an engagement. And our speaker this evening is Cameron Mallow, the National Park Service. And I really appreciate as well the partnership and relationship we have with the National Park Service. And there's so many National Park folks here this evening to support their fellow ranger, which I think is great. And we really appreciate the National Park Service for what they do to preserve and interpret battlefields. Cameron Mallow is from Hardy and Grant counties in West Virginia. Of course, a state born out of the Civil War itself. He graduated from Shepherd University in 2018 with a BA in American History degree in the study of the American Civil War with a minor in West Virginia history. Determined to work for the National Park Service, he began his career in that agency in 2020 on the maintenance crew at the Gettysburg National Military Park. So you were cutting grass, doing that sort of stuff?
Yeah.
Cutting grass, burning the stripes that way. You still live near Gettysburg?
Yeah.
Correct, yeah. A year later, he had shown his worth, and he became a member of the National Park Service interpretive team on the National Mall, which is no easy task to work on that very hot, very busy National Mall in the summer season when 1,000 million people want to know where the nearest bathroom is. And in 2022, he went way out west to the Fort Union Trading Post historical site in Williston, North Dakota, which he told me earlier was a very interesting experience. It allowed him to learn some new history, including galvanized Yankees, which were Confederates who were captured, took a loyalty oath, and were sent out west. And he found a number of their burial sites out there, including some of them were captured in battles around here, I think, which is really cool. And in 2023, he's working closer and closer to his Gettysburg home here. In 2023, he was stationed closer to home at Fort McHenry in Baltimore, which I think is a very, very neat site with a wide array of history. And then he, this year, became a member of the interpretive team at Monocacy National Battlefield, just down the road, our own local National Park Service battlefield that we are very fortunate to have. Between Cameron's NPS jobs, because right now he's a seasonal, he works with children as a substitute teacher, and he volunteers at camps. He is writing a book on a local West Virginia Union militia. What are they called?
Swamp Dragons.
The Swamp Dragons, right? That sounds exciting. And that's now with a press for consideration and in the editing phase. And as I said, he resides in Gettysburg, so without further ado, Cameron, come on up here and tell us about the lingering threat after the July 9th, 1864 Battle of Monocacy.
I'd like to thank you all for coming out this evening and all the support this weekend you gave us at Monocacy, coming out, visiting, learning about the battle. This evening's lecture is kind of put Monocacy in a circle to everything that happened following the battle, all the way up to when General Grant actually himself comes to Monocacy to meet with the commanding staff of the Army of the Shenandoah, Army of West Virginia, and other staff to figure out how to get General Early out of the Shenandoah Valley. And that's where the idea of the title came from also, Lingering Threat. And you'll understand as I start continuing here. First is a quick overview and background on how does these Confederate troops get up here. Of course, we know the history of with the Battle of Monocacy, so I'm not really going to jump into that part of it. But you got General Grant that comes east with President Lincoln's wishes to come out and take full command of all Union forces in the field of operations. And he changes the whole war from that point on, with then fighting 4 major battles against Robert E. Lee, pushing him clean down to the gates of Richmond and then around Petersburg. Beginning siege with the Siege of Petersburg, June 15th through the 18th, 1864. Grant pulls out one of the greatest operations in U.S. military history. He actually crosses the army over the James River on June 14th and 15th, 1864. There's fighting between Philip Sheridan, Wade Hampton's cavalry, north of Richmond, and then also David Hunter in the Shenandoah Valley. He's going to take over after Franz Sigel's major disaster at the Battle of Newmarket. And then from there on June 18th, 1864, the Army of the Potomac attempts to take Petersburg by directly assaults, and they fall the same day that Hunter forces are forced back at Lynchburg, west of Richmond. Shenandoah Valley, spring, summer, 1864. These are the 2 generals that commands these early attempts by the Union forces to take the Shenandoah Valley. Franz Sigel, far side. Biggest reason he loses at Newmarket, he gets excited and starts giving his orders in German. David Hunter, he gets scared out of the Shenandoah Valley. When he gets to Lynchburg, Lee had talked, General Lee of the Confederate forces had actually talked to General Early, and he said, please, I need you to go, orders him, go secure the Shenandoah Valley. We got to have food source to supply the civilians and our soldiers. He gets over to Lynchburg and does a pretty ingenious maneuver to scare Hunter out of the valley. He has all the steam trains that brought all his troops in go back out of Lynchburg and then come back into Lynchburg, blowing their whistles, and then has the crowds in Lynchburg start cheering, bands start playing, people are cheering, the bells are ringing in the town and on the locomotives. Hunter starts getting nervous and then sends messages to Washington, I think I got Lee's whole army in front of me. Well, he doesn't. Early has tricked him. So David Hunter pulls out of Lynchburg and then moves west. And when I mean west, he goes all the way into West Virginia, all the way to the Ohio River, and then puts his men and supplies on steamboats and takes them up to Parkersburg, and then puts an idea to get them back on train and then get them back over to Martinsburg, right here. All of that in a matter of a couple weeks. Sure, I'm from West Virginia. I know good and well. Good luck getting across some of those mountains. So with that, Early has now will start moving up the Shenandoah north. He will get all the way up here to Harper's Ferry on July 4th, cross at Chambersburg, and then we'll fight the battle 7th and 8th west of town, and then of Frederick, and then on July 9th, tomorrow, 160 years later, on the day, he fights Lew Wallace. This is his staff for the campaign. Jubal Early, Robert Rhodes, who's a very well known commander, Stephen Ramser, John B. Gordon, Robert Ramser, who commands a cavalry, Brigadier General Long commands the artillery, John C. Breckinridge, a former vice president of the United States, now Confederate commander. And he is second in command to Jubal Early. After Monocacy, General Early will move on towards Washington. And on the July 11th and 12th, coming up this weekend, he will fight outside of Washington, D.C. He will have a couple days, be there for a couple days. He'll throw out skirmishers with the idea he's going to take Washington. And as he's deploying, he sees troops coming in, and by the troops coming in, those are the rest of the 6th Corps, and that is the 19th Corps. With all of those troops now, Washington is well defended. Early knows it. Early does not have the supplies for a siege on Washington, so he pulls out. He also recalls his cavalry that is to the east under Brigadier General Johnson, Bradley Johnson, and Harry Gilmore. Those cavalry units, they were sent out on the day of the Battle of Monocacy with the idea that they're going to get over to Point Lookout and rescue Confederate POWs. There was also supposed to be a Navy contingency come in and help get those troops out. The Navy contingency does not launch because it's discovered, so they're going to try with cavalry. Thing is, that raid does not really, doesn't make it just south of Baltimore. Plus, if they would have got down here, they're going to run into some Navy boats, some Navy flotilla, and 2 U.S. color troop regiments. July 13th through the 16th, Early will start to leave the area around Fort Stevens and head back towards Virginia, the northern neck of Virginia. By the 15th, Horatio Wright, right here, will start pursuing General Robert E. Lee towards Poolesville, arriving there with the 6th Corps and a detachment of the 19th Corps. The same day, Brigadier General George Crook, right here, arrives at Harper's Ferry. Crook begins crossing elements of the Army at Berlin, Maryland, at what's today Brunswick. A skirmish against Bradley Johnston at Waterford, Virginia. And then by the morning of the 16th, Wright crosses his force at Conrad's Ferry. With this, these two gentlemen had tried to communicate with each other, but the Mosby Rangers have cut telegraph wires in between there, and so them two can't communicate. The idea is they want to try to trap Jubal Early in between the two of them and take him out. But Early is going to be able to escape. He will eventually escape back over into Virginia. Major Tibbett will end up fighting for a little bit of time in the area around the Loudoun Valley, and we'll be able to capture some supply wagons, and but then eventually Robert Ramser's Confederate cavalry appears, and they cut off Tibbett's escape, and that forces them to abandon all the captured supplies they had found. This also leads to an 18-man party on the night of the 16th that went to retrieve their guns from Battery E, 1st West Virginia Light Artillery. The rebels killed all except for Lieutenant William Jocelyn. In that fight, there was 37 wagons captured, 43 wagons burnt, and 54 Confederates captured in the raid. And that was from Dufay, who had been coming in from the west. All right, Battle of Cool Springs. The Battle of Cool Springs happens on July 18th, 1864. It is going to be a hot fight. This is all going to be fought by solely the Army of West Virginia. On the night of Cool Springs, on the 17th, Federal cavalry will try to force a crossing the Shenandoah at Snickers Ford. They're repulsed by Confederate skirmishers. Wright told Crook to assign Joseph Thurborn, the gentleman right here, to cross the Shenandoah at Snickers Ford, and then downstream from Snickers Ford at Cool Springs and flank the Confederates. Well, it turns out he's not going to find the flank, he's going to run right smack dab into the Confederates. Gordon formed on the right of Wharton's and in the center of Rhodes on the left. So this is Wharton's brigade, Wharton's division, Rhodes' division, and then Gordon. Around the experienced soldiers of Young's cavalry was a reason for Rhodes's men to be able to get onto the flank of Thurborn's command. The cavalry, being just new for a time, not very experienced, are going to retreat back across the Shenandoah River to Parker's Island. This will open up the complete left of the complete right of Thurborn's command. The first line falls back to the second line, which is behind a stone wall, and they're going to hold that line all day long until nightfall, when Thurborn is then eventually able to recross his troops back over the river. With 5,000 federal troops, 8,000 troops engaged at Cool Springs, 13,000 in total. Federal casualties were 422, Confederate casualties were 397. The fight is declared today as tactically inconclusive. Confederates claimed victory because they forced Thurborn to withdraw back across the river. David Hunter's command at Harper's Ferry was then sent to attack Early from the north, which eventually then forces the Confederates to abandon Berryville, Virginia, just to the east of Winchester. Now, by this time in the summer of 1864, Jubal Early is going to establish headquarters around Winchester, Virginia. And this gentleman right here, William Averell, who's a very well-known West Virginian, even though he's from New York, he fights most of his career in West Virginia. He is made Folck for an event in early 1862 and then is sent to the mountains or the department of what becomes the Department of West Virginia. That is his punishment. Early withdrew his army on July 19th and then ordered Stephen Ramseur to set up a rear guard defense just in the trenches north of Winchester. On the 19th, Averell, who'd been ordered to advance from Martinsburg, reaches by nightfall Bunker Hill with about 2,350 troops. The cavalry under Vaughn and Jackson forces are skirmishing with Averell on the 20th from 9 a.m. to 11. Averell forces encounter a strong line around Stevens Depot, just in the area where Second Battle of Winchester was fought in 1863. The Federal Vaughn told Ramseur that he was holding Averell in place and requested infantry support. Well, Ramseur disobeyed Early's orders to keep his infantry in the defenses north of Winchester. So he takes his infantry out of Winchester, out of the defenses, and goes up and starts fighting Averell. He puts his division behind a clump of trees which conceals their movement, regiment by regiment. Within a few moments, the Union cavalry under Averell is able to get around the flank, and they pin the in an angle position. They end up then flanking the Confederate line and pulling them back one regiment at a time. In the victory of Rufford's Farm, it boosts Federal morale and it covers Early's withdrawal towards Strasburg. For the engagement, there was 5,650 troops involved in the battle. There were 670 casualties, 220 for the Federals, 450 for the Confederates. After the battle, and when Early learns of what Ramseur's done, Early has a strict talk with him and says, next time you need to obey my orders and not go out and do your own thing. Today, that battlefield is also connected to the third battlefield of Winchester, and today has a lot of modern shopping stores laid out all over the battlefield. So in the area, for example, where the 14th West Virginia Infantry fights in the battle, there's actually a Target shop in the area now. So then with this also leads to Second Kernstown. Now with the victory of Rufford's Farm by Averell, we learn, it's learned that they believe Early is completely withdrawing from the Shenandoah Valley. He's heading back down to Richmond to join up back with General Lee. So the 6th Corps and the 19th Corps are allowed to leave, and they're allowed to return back down to join the Army of the Potomac. Well, with that happening, Early says, I gotta help Lee. I gotta help him. We gotta keep Lee from getting more troops pressured on him. We gotta keep General Grant from getting reinforced. So what's he do? On July 24th, after Crook won at Winchester and advanced his troops just south of Winchester, he's going to attack General Crook and the Army of West Virginia. And he will drive the Union Army, the Army of West Virginia, completely out of Winchester and all the way north, back across the Potomac River towards Hagerstown. In the battle, a gentleman right here in the photo, Colonel James Mulligan, who during his time in West Virginia and before his death actually built a fort in my one hometown of Petersburg, West Virginia, which is called Fort Mulligan, and you can actually visit that today. He is killed while commanding the center of the Union line. He commands the center with Thurborn and Dufay. When he gets flanked from both sides, he sells his beloved 23rd Illinois as he gets wounded, mortally wounded. Leave me, save the colors. They pull the troops pull out, taking their flag and leaving their beloved commander. He will die later as a prisoner, or about the next day or so from the battle. Well, this victory at Kernstown, second Kernstown, opens up for one of my most known raids that I've really put a lot of time into studying about. This encouraged General Early to order McCausland to attack and burn to attack Chambersburg and to ransom it. He's going to use the victory as a morale boost and will launch this attack on July 28th. He will, on reaching Chambersburg, he will ask these demands. And if you refuse to meet these demands, I will burn the town. He demands a payment of $100,000 in gold or $500,000 in federal greenbacks. Well, prior to McCausland arriving at Chambersburg, he ends up, the town folk and the bankers, along with Darius Couch, who commanded federal forces in the area, withdrew towards Carlisle. Well, all the bankers, everybody sent their stuff with them north. And so the town had no money to pay McCausland. So McCausland ordered for the whole town to be burnt. And so in that, there will be close to 500 buildings will be torched, and the town will be engulfed in flames, and it will take years for them to recover from what happened. Nearby, though, while this was going on, there's going to be a young gentleman whose name is William Averell. He's actually been sending out scouts and knows what's going on. Some civilians in the town still blames him today for not coming to their rescue. He will write that his horses were tired, ill horseshoed, and needed replenish of horses so that they could continue on, because they had been in the saddle for many days without fresh remounts. When they get there, they find approximately 560 buildings destroyed. They help put out the fires for a bit before taking out west to chase down John McCausland, and Bradley Johnson. When they got to, when they got to Hancock, Maryland, Bradley Johnson, I'll just go back one. Bradley Johnson right here, here in the corner, he's a Marylander. And they're going to get to Hancock, and he's also got the 1st Maryland and 2nd Maryland Cavalry Regiments. And at Hancock, Maryland, he gets orders from McCausland to burn the town. And Bradley Johnson will say, we're not burning the Hancock. We're not burning it. These people are loyal to the South. A lot of men from this town fight for the Confederacy. We're not burning it. Well, he actually orders for men from the Maryland detachments to actually go out and guard the different storefronts to make sure they're not burnt. Well, General Kelly over in Cumberland finds out what is going on. And he's wondering what has happened. What is going on out here? What's all the commotion? He sends out troops with an armored train and a steam engine out to see what's going on. McCausland finds out about this troop transport coming in. So he orders his one section of his 6 guns to unlimber and fire on the train. The first shot actually takes off the smokestack of the locomotive. And now that's pretty good accuracy, if you ask me, taking off the smokestack of the steam engine. The train is immediately put in reverse and taken back to Cumberland to report what they found. On August 1st, 1864, there's going to be a skirmish at Folck's Mill. McCausland is still living up to the objectives that has been set for him. Collect ransoms and destroy as much of the B&O Railroad as possible. At Folck's Mill outside of Cumberland, Benjamin Kelly, the hero of Philippi from 1861, will put up a stiff resistance at Folck's Mill. He's going to protect Cumberland with whatever it takes. Cumberland, if anybody's ever been there, that is a major railroad town. It still is today. I can remember as a kid going there. I always loved watching the rail yard and watching the engines run back and forward there in Cumberland. And at Folck's Mill, Benjamin Kelly rallies his troops, and they come out on the outskirts of Cumberland on a couple high hills just east of Cumberland to where the road to get to Cumberland goes up between these two mountains. He's going to put a line of defense there with artillery. And he's going to hold, and some of the troops that he's got are 100 Days men. And the 100 Days men are men who are been recruited by the draft. You join for 100 days, you help guard the B&O Railroad, you do background, that will then allow more experienced troops to go to the front. So with that, the battle will commence on August 1st, and McCausland will not take Cumberland. Kelly's defense is too strong. During McCausland's withdrawal from Cumberland, he will cross at a little place called Green Springs. There's a nice little ford there on the Potomac. At the ford, after crossing into Green Springs, he will meet a group of Confederate guerrilla fighters or partisan rangers called the McNeil Rangers. They will end up telling McCausland, we just burned a couple bridges between New Creek and Cumberland. There's a small garrison at New Creek. Might even have a chance to destroy some more of the railroad there in New Creek. McCausland goes, okay. So they head to New Creek. They take the Union garrison under Colonel Latimer has withdrawn all the forces into Fort Fuller. McCausland takes Fort Piano and starts to try to make attacks against Fort Fuller. Well, suddenly out of nowhere, a train comes. That train is coming in from Cumberland. During the night, Union forces had got out and rebuilt the bridge. It opened up for troops to come in. So under Major James Sampson, elements of the 11th West Virginia Infantry and the 6th West Virginia Infantry will come in to New Creek and help beat off McCausland. And because of that, they will end up winning the battle at New Creek. The Union will protect New Creek and the B&O Railroad, and McCausland is ordered to withdraw. He then withdraws towards Romney, West Virginia, and then takes position and heads south towards Moorefield, actually my other hometown. So you can see how this comes in a circle for me. On August 7th, in the early morning hours, William Averell is going to attack John McCausland. Well, the night before, John McCausland has another meeting with the McNeil Rangers. And they tell him, you better get out of here and go elsewhere to camp for the night. Averell is not in Hancock anymore. He's in Romney, and he's coming for you because they've left. A McNeil Ranger had been in Romney and used what we locals over in Moorefield call Trough Road, which parallels the main road between Romney and Moorefield, and got to Moorefield to warn John Hanson McNeil. Well, McCausland don't believe him. There's no way. I'm not listening to you partisan rangers. Get out of here. Well, fine then. They go on their own, leaving McCausland to deal with Averell. Well, McCausland orders Bradley Johnson's men to camp almost a mile away from his brigade on the other side of the South Branch River. McCausland puts his troops actually in this field here in this photo. If you're looking at this photo, you're looking north towards Old Fields and where Willow Wall is about a mile or two away. Maybe even about a little farther. Behind here, if you're ever in that area, there's a Walmart. So McCausland Camp is marked kind of by a Walmart today. So the next morning, Averell is going to use a certain type of scout technique. This is Archibald H. Rollin of Company K, 1st West Virginia Cavalry. His uniform, he's wearing Confederate gray. He's a Jesse Scout. The name comes from General Fremont's wife, Jessie Fremont. I don't know why the name sticks, but it does. Averell will order his about handful of Jesse Scouts to go in the morning of the 7th and capture all of McCausland's pickets, relief pickets, and outposts. They'll even find a group of them asleep, and they'll go up to them with their pistols drawn right in their face and say, wake up, you're captured. You Chambersburg burning moron, and other words that I'm not about ready to say in the reports. In this battle, Averell, when he left Romney, well, actually ordered a 22nd Ringgold to do 33 miles in a night. I know it seems like a lot. I can't believe he done it, but he does it. He's actually going to shut the back door so McCausland can't get back into Virginia. He's going to take 1st New York, 14th PA, Ohioans, and West Virginia troops, and he's going to come down and attack McCausland. Well, when he gets there, it's literally taken out in detail. McCausland literally gets his teeth knocked in because Bradley Johnson has been placed north of the river and McCausland to the south of the river. McCausland, when he wakes up, he's actually in the town of Moorefield asleep. He's in a hotel room at the McMecken house. He comes out with his stuff and a bunch of books that he bought that he took in Hancock, Maryland. I guarantee he didn't pay for them. And then he rides out to the battle trying to reorganize his troops, but it's too late. Averell is going to win the day. The fight alone with McCausland at Moorefield is going to have very traumatic effects on Early. It will affect his cavalry operations for the remainder of his time in the Shenandoah. He will end up not having a strong enough cavalry to face against Sheridan when Sheridan takes command in August. All right. So now, here's how it all comes to full circle with Monocacy. Here at Monocacy in August, General Grant himself will come and will meet with Sheridan, David Hunter, George Crook at the Thomas House. At the Thomas House, they will discuss plans of how they're going to deal with Early, this lingering threat in the Shenandoah. David Hunter, one of the first things done, David Hunter is relieved of command. Grant doesn't waste time to get rid of him. And he puts Philip Sheridan in command. And Philip Sheridan will eventually completely destroy the Shenandoah Valley with the burning from September 26th to October 8th, and will eventually drive with the Battle of Williamsport, Virginia, will drive Early completely out. But also, it will end up leading to the also recalling troops from the Army of the Valley to join Lee at Petersburg. In conclusion, what happens at Monocacy here in 1864 in July and then in August, the meeting here, how to deal with the lingering threat of Early, who's still shown that he's willing to fight and even raid still into the north if he's capable and able to. The raid on Chambersburg and the burning actually allows the troops to, and shows that the Confederacy is not backing down. No matter what they got, they're still going to fight. And so when Sheridan comes in command after the meeting at Monocacy and Grant returns to the situation down around Petersburg and Richmond, Sheridan will go through and take care of the lingering threat that has been plaguing the North and Washington since July of 1864, earlier that year. In the 2 months that Early is up around the Shenandoah, from July into August and then into the fall, until Sheridan comes in, Early became a headache for Washington. What was he going to do? And so the only way, and so with Sheridan taking command, he ended this lingering threat in the Shenandoah. Thank you very much for coming out. If there's any questions, I'll be happy to take them and go over any slides if somebody has a question.
What's the picture on the screen?
Yes. This picture right here, this is actually Monocacy Junction before the war, of the train coming into the station.
How
Yes.
many troops did Sheridan have?
Sheridan is going to have the 6th Corps, the 19th Corps, and the Army of West Virginia in his command. So you're talking a few thousand troops to go down through the Shenandoah and completely rage havoc on the valley. I'd estimate it close to in the 10,000s at least. Yes.
Wasn't there one situation when the Union started to retreat and Sheridan had to come in from a meeting he was at to
Yeah,
rally them?
that is the Battle of Cedar Creek.
Okay.
According to the Google machine, at Cedar Creek, Sheridan had about 32,000 men. Early had 21,000 at that point.
Yeah.
One of the things that, have any of you been over to Petersburg, West Virginia, or Moorefield? If you haven't, it's not that far away geographically. It takes you a while to get there because you got to follow the mountains around. When you get out there, it's an entirely different feeling to the war. It's real mountains, and when you get into Fort Mulligan, you just look out at these huge mountains. And the soldiers that served out there, I think it affected them a little bit too. You can correct me if I'm wrong, Cameron, but there's almost sort of a Vietnam feel to it because these guys are in these garrisons like Fort Mulligan.
Yes.
And if they get outside that fort, they could get hit by McNeil's Rangers or something like that.
Yes, you are exactly correct. It is like, I've never really explained it that way before, but yes, it's almost like a Vietnam feeling out there in the mountains.
They set up like a fire base basically.
Yes.
And inside of it, they're okay. And then if they go out, they don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah. There's several examples of your loyalties, home guard, helping your volunteer forces that come through there. Then there's incidences where you got different Confederate guerrilla groups are firing from hillsides on the opposite side as they're coming through. It is just a completely different feeling out there.
If you're ever interested, there's a place called Fort Hill, right?
Fort Hill.
This is such it's an odd Civil War place if you're used to Antietam or Gettysburg or even Monocacy. It's literally a fort on a knife-back ridge, but it has some of the best preserved earthworks I've ever seen.
Where is it?
It's outside of Romney.
Oh, that's Fort Mill Ridge.
Fort Mill Ridge. Sorry, I called it Fort Hill. Fort Mill Ridge.
Yes, that's Fort Mill Ridge. It was built by the 1st West Virginia Infantry with also the 54th Pennsylvania.
Yeah, Google it, look it up, and there, you can get there. You know, there's a road network of the Park Road that'll take you up there, but the earthworks almost look like they just walked away and left them. I was stunned when I went up there.
Yep. Yep, the trenches are still there. It's been set up to where you can walk up into the middle ramparts of the battery placement, and then you can actually walk around and look at the trenches that are around there. The troops would actually camp down at the bottom, and then they would march like a company for so many days and occupy the fort.
It's a stupid question, but are we talking Petersburg, West Virginia, or Petersburg, Virginia?
Petersburg, West Virginia. But for a time it was Petersburg, Virginia too, so there was a couple.
There was a big battle there, yes.
Yeah,
First time I went to Petersburg, I went into the Ponderosa.
that's in Moorefield.
Moorfield. Okay, I went to Moorfield, and I was the only guy in there without a camouflage baseball cap. So I didn't get the memo. But it's really interesting out there.
Yes. Oh,
With the research you did for this presentation and your ongoing research on this topic, we know that Jubal Early does not care for John McCausland prior to Monocacy. He then has to lean on McCausland during a good chunk of the Monocacy campaign, and then has him do the Chambersburg raid. Now, you did a nice job commenting about how McCausland is so wrecked after Moorefield that he's not able to provide Early with decent cavalry support against Sheridan, but what is their personal relationship? Does Early go back to just hating all cavalry again, because he's pretty famous for doing that for most of the war, or does he kind of understand what happened?
that is a good question. I know the relationship with Jubal Early and McCausland is kind of a seesaw. It's a seesaw throughout their time working together. That would probably take even some more research, but what I have seen is over the years in the research, Jubal Early will write, if it wasn't for the Battle of Moorefield, what happened? You're talking two sections, 4 guns captured there. You're talking close to 400 horses captured there. You're talking close to then 600 troopers, Confederate troopers, captured there by Averell, who only brought to the field 1,300 men. And Jubal Early will write that if it wasn't for the Battle of Moorefield, I've seen it, Cedar Creek could have been maybe went a different way for him.
So does Brad Johnson stay with Early all the way through to the end and conclusion in the valley? Is he there through all those campaigns?
Well, I know Bradley Johnson for a time at Moorefield was captured, but the Union troopers were moving so quickly to get to McCausland, they actually ended up releasing him in the same fight. He got away. I believe he was with Early for the remainder in the valley.
I only mention that because Brad Johnson lived just a few blocks away here in Frederick.
Yep.
Someone's just a bunch, yeah.
Yeah, I'll take all of them. Yep.
So post-Monocacy and post-Fort Stevens, aside from fighting a rear guard across the top of Virginia, Early is ordered to stay in the valley for essentially to defend it, to
Yeah.
keep Union armies out. But what are Early's, and the Confederacy for that matter, what are their strategic objectives by staying in the valley? What are they trying to accomplish by this point?
Keep their food source. If they lose because the Shenandoah Valley is recognized as the bread basket of the Confederacy. They was even prior to this campaign in Richmond, women were in the streets of Richmond, from some stuff I've read, fighting over bread. There was a bread riot by women.
Yes, well, what I mean is, what is the Confederacy's goal at this point? They're going to defend the valley.
Defend the valley.
What are they still thinking scare Lincoln, disrupt the election, or do they have something else up their sleeves? Or are they trying to work that out, and that's why they keep Early there, so that gives them time to develop that?
I'd say, there's the way way Early showed by sending McCausland to Chambersburg, they're not afraid to back down because they wanted to come up here and attack the capital. They knew that this was maybe could be the victory that wins it for them. It gets a foreign country into the picture. It could be a possible chance for McClellan to win and then end the war and let them live in peace and have their own country. So yes, there's always that chance of another invasion of some sort. But with Sheridan coming into the picture, Chambersburg was, you could say, the last major offensive by the Confederacy into this part of the North.
We had, well, go ahead.
Yes.
One back here. Yeah.
You were mentioning earlier about the interaction between the partisan irregulars and the McNeil Rangers. Was there any plan or the regular Confederate cavalry to interact with, or was it just limitation of the regulars that didn't interact with them at all?
Well, I can tell you this. In '65, Harry Gilmore, who was also a part of this raid with McCausland, returns to the valley, returns to the South Branch Valley to pull the McNeil Rangers and a group of Woodrowson's Missourians who linked with John Hanson McNeil, the McNeil Rangers, after the Battle of New Market, because they took the most casualties at the Battle of New Market for the Confederacy, about 82% casualties. They went into the battle literally with pistols. They were Missourians that got captured but was sent for parole, and then when they released, they just stayed over here in the valley, in the South Branch Valley, and fought with the McNeil Rangers. Harry Gilmore was sent over there to recruit them to join regular services with the Confederacy cavalry, but they refused to do it, and he was captured by Jesse Scouts that night there in Hardy County, up the South Fork. He was captured, and one interesting note in the official records, they say in his haversack was letters ordering the McNeil Rangers to join Harry Gilmore for another attack, but also to leave the Swamp Dragons alone. So,
Those are your guys as well.
yeah,
There's a question back here.
yes.
Pardon me if I've forgotten, and you mentioned this, I've forgotten, but was there a strategic military objective in sending troops all the way from north to capture and ransom Chambersburg before they burned it?
I believe the objective, way I've understood, was to get money to replenish for the destruction of stuff in the valley by Hunter again. And that, for Chambersburg, that is a very high ransom. There's no, they weren't even given time to even try to get enough money put together, even close to that, to deal with that. Now, it is in reports they did get some money, the soldiers, because in Moorefield, when Averell attacks, some of the soldiers started emptying their pockets of stuff they had taken from Chambersburg, and money was seen to be floating through the morning air in the camps because they were dumping everything that they had taken so they didn't get shot, because some of the men from Chambersburg to Moorefield had actually been hung and shot by local citizens who had heard about the burning. And then the Pennsylvanians with Averell, they were actually shooting some of McCausland's men there in the streets of Moorefield and there around the fields in Old Fields. Yes?
One last question.
Sure.
Very first slide you show there, is that a depiction of Monocacy battlefield, or?
That was
Very pretty.
Yeah, it's a shelling in Chambersburg, I think.
Yes, that was actually, if you go just west of, if you just go west outside of Chambersburg towards what's called Fort Loudon, up on the hill, there's like couple little convenience stores and a gas station. This painting is depicting where McCausland actually lined his guns up and fired over the town of Chambersburg to announce his arrival. He would line up the 3 sections of artillery, six guns, and shoot over the town to announce his arrival. And then we'll go down into the middle of Chambersburg at the town square, and we'll announce the demands for the ransom. Yes?
One last question? Sure.
I've heard this, I don't know if it's true. The burning of the valley helped flood over the years Harper's Ferry. Is there any truth to that? Since they denuded everything, the water just came down.
I have not heard that. It's possible.
Yes, possible, because if you take out, like, over the years, if you take out a bunch of trees and you open up for water will do that. Know that from history of floods in my home area.
You know, just before we conclude, when you were talking about all these small actions and McNeil's Rangers and these raids, when the war does conclude, there's an argument among some Confederates to continue on in a guerrilla war.
Yeah.
And fight in a guerrilla war. And Robert E. Lee and among others say, no, we're not going to do that. We've been defeated. We're going to go home. And I think when you look at some of these actions, you get a little glimpse, if that guerrilla war had continued, what we would have seen. Mean, ugly little incidents, towns burned, raids in the middle of the night. And unfortunately, in the South, with the rise of the KKK after the Civil War, some of that sort of stuff did occur against the African American population. But I think because people like Lee and others said, we're not going to continue that, and that I think it sort of died down, we didn't have more of this sort of stuff in our particular region.
I think it'd be safe to say what we see in like the Middle East, other countries today where they're having issues still. That could have been almost what would have happened here if that guerrilla warfare had been allowed to play out.
Right.
Lee said, no, let's just end it.
Because a lot of these guys veer on the edge of Confederate troops or just want to rob a,
Yeah.
cause some mayhem.
Lee didn't like partisan rangers, period.
Yeah.
No, he didn't. It wasn't long into the war, he actually ordered all of these partisan ranger groups and all of these small, like the Charlotte, for example, some cavalry units that fought in my area before they became Virginia Cavalry Regiments, like the Charlottesville Cavalry and the Rockbridge Cavalry. They were operating on their own. But then when General Lee starts to order for these units to quit being partisan groups and form together, so Lee was trying to end it. And that was a big problem even down in southern West Virginia for a bit.
Well, thank you, Cameron. Often untold stories and more unusual aspects of the Civil War in this region. And thank you all.